Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm going to call our City Council study session and special focus area meeting to order, and we will start with roll call.
Deputy Mayor Wales.
Here.
Councilmember Baggett.
Here.
Councilmember Corsi.
Here.
Councilmember Holman.
Here.
Councilmember Pelosa.
Here.
Councilmember Trout-Manuel.
Here.
Councilmember Wagner.
Here.
We have an updated agenda, and on the new agenda under announcements, reports, and presentations, item A calls for SR 164 East Auburn Access Project briefing, and we have scheduled about 30 minutes. Please come and join us at the presentation table.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we're used to interrupting, but some people like to have their presentation time solid and questions at the end. What would be your preference?
Interruption would be just
Oh,
fine.
good. That's our nature, so we appreciate that. Okay, introduce yourselves, and we're very pleased that you're here this evening.
Thank you. My name is Jerry Hinkey. I'm the Chief Investment Officer for the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe. I've been there over 22 years. Started out as a controller, had different positions with the tribe from general manager, tribal council treasurer, and CFO for the tribe, and CEO for the tribe. My current operations is pretty much Chief Investment Officer. I maintain the tribe's assets. And any large purchase or any large dollar amounts, I'm the one that they send to talk to the bankers.
Welcome.
Thank you. So I'd like to open by saying I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the time by your staff. They've helped out immensely on getting us started through this project, and it's going to be quite the project. We've hired a firm, KPFF, to help with that. We have subcontractors, and one of them's here with us tonight, Jeannie Akitanza, and I'll let her get started.
Yes, that's right. I'm Jeannie Akitanza. I'm working for Transpo Group, and my background is a transportation planner, traffic engineer, and kind of oversight of the environmental transportation IJR interchange justification process. So that's my background and expertise. I also want to introduce my partner here, or our partner from WashDOT.
So my name is Hong Huyen. I'm WashDOT's engineering manager in the Snohomish-King County area. So I've been, because this is a state highway project, I've been working very closely with Jerry and Jeannie to see the project through.
Great, thank you. I'm going to take you through a presentation, and please do interrupt, and we will try to, use best use of our time. So today we're going to talk about a little bit of the background and history, and that's kind of where we are, where the investments have been made to date, and where we expect them to go. A project statement that is kind of akin to what we call our goals and objectives, or the purpose and need, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Status and process is how we're going to get, to our project. And then where we are in the process right now, we've worked closely with your City of Auburn staff. They've been great helpers, and they've given us opportunities to work with them right here in the cities, using some of your space, working with some of our other partners, WashDOT, and City of Enumclaw, King County, and I know I'm forgetting PSRC, others. And with that group, we've developed some potential solutions, just the broadest range of solutions, and from there we'll tell you what the next steps are. I think for us, we wanted to get through some of these briefings, and we'll probably schedule another briefing with the City of Enumclaw, and then we really want to move into the public involvement process as well. There are some other things that we want to achieve. So that's where we're at. We'll talk about next steps too. So far, that seemed like a good overarching presentation. So a little bit on the introduction and status. I hope you can, you should be able to see this. So In the background and history piece of this, this corridor, SR 164, and how it connects with 18 and how it operates through the city of Auburn and serves the Muckleshoot tribe and Enumclaw, has been under study for a number of years. WashDOT identified it in their SR 164 route development plan, and that was a multi-jurisdictional group starting back in 2001. In 2004 and 5, they had a route development plan corridor study. They worked with, all the jurisdictional partners and identified what, some of the issues and solutions might be. And then on 2009, there was a bypass study, and that too, as you probably note, that's the kind of right in the middle of the Great Recession. So that study came up with some ideas, and then it left it right there. And we haven't seen a resurgence of funding and this is probably wrong, is it not 2014, it's probably 2013, sorry. The M Street project was completed, but that also looked at some solutions for improving connectivity in this area. And then in 2015, this summer, Connecting Washington Partners developed a whole transportation package of ideas. Within that was looking at this project. I think it was named the East SR 164 East Access. So it was identified
SR 18.
SR 18. SR 164 East Access, and it was identified as that. And then from there, the Muckleshoot Indian tribe started to carry that forward. So they identified $500,000 to start moving that project forward ahead of when state dollars would become available. The state dollars can become available in the 2017-2019 biennium, and so that's our goal, is to grease the skids until we get to that point. For that $500,000, we've been trying to do some context setting, some data collection, looking at alternatives that we'll talk a little bit about. And then starting in 2017, the middle of 2017 for that biennium, using some of the Connecting Washington Partnership money, some funding from the Muckleshoots to move that ahead into preliminary design, environmental documentation, and getting this ready for what the Connecting Washington Partners would desire, which is moving these things into design build. So that's into the about 60% design or so, something like that. And right-of-way purchase. So that would start in 2019. And in that realm, there's approximately $12 million. The project overall could, with some of the bypass designs that they came up with earlier, we know it would be much more than 12 million. So along the lines, throughout this process, we would be looking for other funding partners, etc. Good. Okay. So we start all of these projects with a project statement. From an environmental perspective, the foundational document is called a purpose and need, and it is very foundational. It establishes the project with the federal or whoever the environmental process is going to be to review the project. Right now, the project statement says, and I'll kind of read it with you, the purpose of the 18164 East Auburn Access project is to develop a sustainable and long-term solution that improves travel reliability for people and goods. It accommodates current travel demand for freight, trucks, transit, and passenger vehicles, and it accommodates future travel demand for freight trucks, transit, and passenger vehicles associated with regional and local growth. It supports the population growth, well-being, and economic development of South King County populations, including the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe and the communities of Auburn and Enumclaw. It enhances safety and improves emergency response. These things felt like motherhood and apple pie to us. Not too specific. We don't want it to be too specific in deciding what the solution is, and I want it to be broad enough so that we're looking at the broad basket of solutions, and yet we don't want it to be too broad, whereas we can't, doesn't tell us where even our project limits are. So that's the intent of developing a good purpose and need statement. We're still working on it. It is something that our federal friends at the Federal Highway Administration would be very interested in if they are, in fact, the environmental reviewer, which...
And they are part of our group.
Then they are part of our group, and they have been attending our meetings, so we have their attention as well. So I want to just be clear. This is, oops, oh, no. There we go. So I wanted this is a similar presentation that we presented to the overall tribal membership.
Yeah, general council meeting happened a couple weeks ago, and we presented it before the tribal membership.
Yeah, so their council is aware, and their general membership, just so everybody, nobody wants to hear about this. They want to hear firsthand.
We're trying to be inclusive.
And be all inclusive. And so what we presented to them and what we want people to be clear about, there are probably 3 related processes for selecting what this best project alternative is. And the technical group that we've developed, including your staff and the staffs of the other agencies, are the people that we are hoping, will be the right group of folks with a lot of engagement with the public and new executives and electeds. But there are 3 processes. There's practical solutions, which Hung can talk about, but it is how WashDOT is managing those Connecting Washington partner monies. It is intended to be all-inclusive. They have a process for presenting this to their management.
Yeah, so it's just, practical solution is an approach that we do things down there. Like, we've got to make sure we hear from the communities, the people who actually live and experience the projects, the locals, the electeds. And so just basically being inclusive in getting input to drive the project, making sure we understand the problem that we're trying to fix, before we try to fix something. So there's a lot of details like that.
Yeah. So there's a consistency with all the Connecting Washington partners that they're going to go through that process, and they're also reviewed on a regular basis with WashDOT quarterly. I think they review a lot of these projects. The other thing is that they're multimodal, and as Hung said, they're broadly inclusive. The other process is the environmental documentation, and that is something that's approved by our friends. We believe because of the scale and size of this project, not that it's on an interstate that the feds would have a nexus with, but because of the level of impact, we believe that Federal Highways is the right agency to have be our reviewer. We're working with them, the new FHWA, and what we've seen from them is a lessening of rigor, or not lessening of rigor, but more streamlined. And they've been participating in our meetings and coming to our meetings, but we still believe that they are the final say in the environmental review.
And economic development has been part of their review process, which is a change.
Yes, and they and the state are interested, not as they would see economic development as a benefit overall. I think that is a result of the economy, the Great Recession. Economic development is a reason that we do things. Not a surprise there. The last process is the interchange justification report, and that is, it's a federal process, but it is adopted by the state, and WashDOT will be the last reviewer. So anything that modifies or breaks access on a limited access facilities, and in this case, State Route 18, has to go through a certain scrutiny. There are what are called 8 policy points that follows the federal process for an interstate. But that process, the interchange justification report process, those policy points, if we modify or break access in this area, there's a whole set of processes that we must go through. Approvals from the state design engineer, and that process is approved by WashDOT. So just making sure that we all understand, we need to be broad in our thinking and inclusive in our engagement, and we are trying and gearing everything toward working toward those.
Councilmember Trout-Manuel.
So are you, I know there's been a lot of talk of Highway 18 coming in through and connecting to 164. Is that still being talked about?
That's this project.
You'll
That's
see
project?
that in the set of solutions. So we talked about a broad idea of what our problem statement is, and to solve that, we did a little tour, and we're going to come up with solutions, and you'll see that there's a basket of things that is broad enough to meet these processes, but one does include looking at new access on 18.
And you'll be notifying the people up there that live up on?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. That's what we're talking about.
So yeah, so add that. So back in 2009, when we had that bypass studies, that was one of the options that was recommended. But with this new approach that we're trying to implement, we're going to take a step back and identify what's the problem, what they're trying to fix, and if that can be one of the solution to the problem. So that's what the team is doing, is trying to identify the problem, and then looking at the multitude of solutions that may work with that problem.
Because there's still a lot of people really concerned about it going through Dogwood, and the traffic would be atrocious if
Yep.
it goes through there. So is there another area that you're looking to have it come through?
You'll see that in the solution.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank
No,
you.
And we're not unaware of that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
That's good. And like I said, we want to make sure that the process covers past history, but also everything we've heard and new things that are coming to light.
And part of this too is that you look at all possible solutions first, and then as there's issues with them, then you come back down to a right solution. So everything has to be on the table, and then we start.
Thank you, it's nice to hear, thank you.
And the reason for talking about those processes is really to point to that, you know, we have put all those processes into an integrated process. So what we want to show here is these are basic steps in any process. Making sure that we have a multi-agency, interdisciplinary, meaning, you know, traffic people, environmental people, land use people, and stakeholder advisory committee. So that's what we've been working with. Our team includes the Muckleshoots, Washita, Auburn, Enumclaw, King County, and FHWA. So we've been marching, the ones with the check marks. All of these processes, the three processes I mentioned, all of them generally have these same steps, and I'm just showing you that, you know, we are marching.
And the Puget Sound Regional Council.
And the Puget Sound Regional Council, and you know, we've been working with them and making sure that this is future funding ready too. That's very important for us. We've looked at identifying the baseline contextual needs, so we've been working with your staff, PSRC staff, on what the latest modeling is, traffic data, and we're kind of working through some of that, making sure we have a good, our purpose and need statement is substantiated. You know, there really is queuing, there really is congestion. And then FHWA and WashDOT coordination, we're doing a lot of that. We have this purpose and need statement and working through the stakeholder public communications fund. So now that we've got some ideas and made some of this found work, we really want to start getting out to the public. And you know, we, like Jerry said, we don't want anybody to be surprised. So that's our next step, and part of that is really briefing the electeds first, making sure that we're on board with you guys. So these are the next step, is the range of solutions, select design elements, and go through a thoughtful evaluation process. So, you know, we winnow down to solutions that make sense and meet the goals and objectives, and then review that in context of environmental and documentation. So our last steps would be the documentation, which could either be NEPA EIS or environmental assessment, whatever environmental document, and an interchange report if that's where we go, an interchange justification report. So kind of heavy on the documentation. Upfront, a lot of process, and back end, let's save our dollars for, you know, documenting it when we're all kind of aligned. So we know we can't do this without partnership, and this just kind of shows who we've been working with. You've heard them before. Enumclaw has been real interested. The tribe, King County, not only their road department, but also their transit agency, and they've got ideas for us. WashDOT, the state, different aspects of the state, city, FHWA, as I said. So what they're contributing is staff time. We've gotten to know, you know, your staff. Yes.
Councilmember Pelosa.
You mentioned PSRC earlier, but aren't they a big player here?
We need to add them, and I apologize for that. We have been working with them to make sure that we're aligned with their long-range plan, the 2040 plan, and we've gotten buy-off on the long-range travel demand model. So yes, we should add them. And what they're contributing to is staff time, supporting the capital investment ideas as we go forward, supporting the operations investments as we identify those, funding for planning and funding for construction. So we want everybody to help, and that's the best way to work on these processes. Thank you for pointing that out. So where have we gotten? We did a nice tour of the area, got a bus ride out of that.
Yep.
We had all of our partners there. including FHWA. They came and we did a site visit. The FHWA was a little late for that, but they apologize. We'll take them again. So we want to talk about the potential solutions. And something we want everybody's input on to make sure we're covering this correctly is the evaluation criteria. Right now, in general terms, it's accommodating the future growth, like we said, reducing congestion, improving mobility. Mobility means moving people and goods, not just cars. And then safety, improving safety, providing redundancy and reliability. Redundancy and reliability were things that were mentioned.
Councilmember Wagner.
I don't see something in the evaluation criteria that addresses, I don't know, subjective things like the King George family just plain didn't want a road through their property. And that was an evaluation criteria. I was on that 2001 group. And so, you know, that's what led us into the interchange study, and we pretty much had that off the table because of the criteria that's not listed here, which is impact to other entities.
And I guess that would be redundancy, reliability. Yes, and probably that doesn't show here, but we would look at the environment in general and all the impacts from an environmental perspective, correct? So if that's, you know, from endangered species to impacts to built environment, they would probably come in that realm. So.
But I think you ought to list it there, because I think working with a tribe as a partner, you have a different set of evaluation than you might have with your typical project, where culture and history become very important in addition to these things you listed.
Right.
That's part of the first set of open houses too. Is, you know, we're not going to, our first set of open houses probably won't talk about solutions in any great detail, just that we have a set of solutions, or that we have a broad basket of ideas. We don't want people to think we are too far down the road on ideas, and we really aren't. You'll see that. But more along the lines of, do we have the right purpose and need statement? Do we have the right project objectives? And do we have the right set of evaluation criteria? Is this the right process? That's how we generally start out. In environmental process, it's called scoping.
Sure, I was project manager for a career, so I understand this, trying to get a project going. But all I'm saying is, when you're working with a tribe, you have some important history and cultural things to evaluate that you might not if you were working somewhere else.
And that's, you know, that's why we want to be more inclusive than not inclusive.
So,
Councilmember
so when are you
Trout-Manuel.
planning on having your first open house, and where's it going to be? You said you're going to have it in different places. Where are you going to?
I didn't say that, but we do have a plan, and a public involvement plan, and it would include broad outreach to different areas. Depending on, you know, outreach here, we could, you know, we wanted to make sure we met with you. There's maybe some other, I think.
Municipality, City of Enumclaw.
Yeah, we had to talk to the city. We wanted to talk to the city of Enumclaw, and I know the Watershed is also briefing their practical solutions group. So based on that, then we would set those meetings. It's hard to have things in the summer, so you know that might be add into our discussion. I'd like to hear from you guys. From some folks, I hear that if you make it a public, an online open house, sometimes that's acceptable to have in the summer. And as long as you give people a long amount of time to feedback, but I'd love your perspective on that as well. So that's part of the some of the feelings, you know, some of the feedback we'd love.
It's always nice to have have where people can do face-to-face. We're getting too much online nowadays, where we're missing this face-to-face communication, and I am more for having stuff like that, you know, like having people come in and talk to you and see your plants and everything.
Yeah, and there may be other ways to meet with people too, even if you can't come to the open house. Maybe there's like listening sessions that we could have, things like that, or we certainly intend to have briefings with different groups if they're interested. Okay. So some of the ideas we have to. Practical solutions requires that we look not only at local streets. I won't drill into these just yet, but we have to look at system management. Those could be better signal, better signal progression, or other ITS solutions, smart signals, adaptive signals, other ITS, what we call transportation system management solutions. And then demand management solutions, which I haven't listed, but those could be, could we move more people in fewer vehicles, meaning could we improve transit through here? So we talked to Metro, they had some ideas for us that we could add. And the system management, demand management solutions are part of a multimodal solution. Connectivity of your pedestrian and bike networks too will be added in. We'll look at all of these things. Maybe those aren't the full solution, maybe they become part of our solution, but we want to make sure that our ideas are broad.
The tribe has just recently invested in a transportation department, or a transit system, so they were able to get half a dozen new buses that able to move members to Auburn and back and
Yeah.
connect up with Metro.
And Metro Connects is also, going to increase their service along the corridor as well. Yeah, so one of the things that we have to do, though, is also look at a local street system. Part of the interchange justification report process requires that one of the policy points is, have you looked at the local solution? Can you meet the need without breaking, quote unquote, breaking access on SR 18? So we will be looking closely at that. And some of those ideas came from the city's plans. We have 4 of those ideas, and I'm not sure if you can see some of these, but this was from the comprehensive plan, connecting to R Street, connecting R Street under, making that more of a road and connecting over to 6th along an alignment. That's the R Street alignment. Just better ways of increasing circulation connectivity. So that's the 3A, the R Street underpass. Some other ways, just providing this east-west connection in that large undeveloped area, different connections, and all of these lines are meant to be theoretical. They could move in a variety of different ways, but they are just shown to intend that it would just be improving a grid network to just provide connectivity. And
maybe you could explain to us, the blue lines, are those the proposed options, and the red fenced quilted area is?
That's steep slope. So in looking, as we're developing these solutions, we want to start putting information in there that also addresses the affected environment, the environmental constraints that we're dealing with. By putting the steep slopes in there, I think it's helpful to give a little bit of context for the community. We'll put other ones in there as well as we understand them, if there are streams and things like that. Then the lines are intended to be not just places where we could put connections, and putting these connections in could be, they are in general locations. And it could be one or all of them. What's left to do now is to start testing these with traffic travel demand models. So those are some of the things we would do. Does that make sense?
So does it look, so there are possibly 2 connection points, or it would be just 1 connection point, or it could be none of those?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. It's one or many.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Councilmember Wagner.
Is there going to be another slide here that shows an actual interchange to 18?
Yes.
Okay.
So these are what I call local street improvements. What can we do without breaking access or putting in an interchange? And that's a very important distinction. The breaking access is like I said, a separate process, a separate document. We're following a similar process. We're trying to make sure that we, don't have to go back and cover other steps. But in the future, if there is an option that breaks access on SR 18, a limited access facility, we would need to prepare a full document that is approved by state DOT. It's their interstate. So here's a couple more of the local street improvements. Just improvements at M Street and SR 164. What could we do there? We'll take a sharpen our pencils to look at what could be done there. We know that that's a choke point on the corridor. And then other connections, that these would be just connecting our street down, providing kind of more of a block level grid if you will. But will these things meet current and future demand? The other, one of the, this yellow line is the urban growth boundary, and I just want to make sure that's clear to everybody too. And these solutions, we don't get too attached to them, but we are just making sure we have the broadest range. Even our first public meeting really won't talk much about these. It's more the context and the overarching study. So the next set of solutions is this midpoint access, and this harkens back to the original study where they looked at a new access on 18. Somewhere it would make the most sense for it to be as central to the two interchanges as possible, the current 164 and 18. It's like slightly under 2 miles. And the state likes to have a mile separation between interchanges. But we feel like, because of having that access, we would want to make it as central as possible. Some of the questions that we've heard are, putting in a full interchange, providing access to and from the east. With growth in the east King County, through Covington, Black Diamond, things like that, we know that there's going to be some growth in that direction, and it would be maybe short-sighted to not have connections. And in this one too, not to be too precise about the solutions. This has a range of ideas. We could put this connection in a number of places, and we'll look at all of them. And you mentioned, that there are specific property owners and they have specific issues, and I imagine all of the property owners have some interests along the way. So,
again, it's listing all the possible solutions and then going through and identifying, evaluating, and see where we come up with as a best solution.
Yeah, and we were also including in this a half interchange, and it's part of the, it was included initially in the study. State does not love those kind of half interchanges because people get confused. They want to make sure that there's full access and full directional
What is a
access.
half interchange?
Half interchange, in this case, it would have been access to and from the west. So there would be an eastbound off and a westbound on, and that's it. Kind of very limited.
But they like the full diamond.
Yeah, well, the state they don't want people to be confused, or there are questions about that, but sometimes
so
there is reason to.
generally, a full interchange give people access to each direction, so it's help with the flow. It works better.
We've all been lost in places where full access wasn't provided, and you're having to find your way to another interchange.
Councilmember Wagner.
Are there options where there is access to the north to this new blue road?
From the interchange, from here north,
Yep.
we don't have any like that now.
Well, that's good, because our study group didn't like that idea, because they thought a lot of traffic would go through that residential area.
Auburn Black Diamond Road, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have the train track as well, which is
A
pretty
constraint.
popular.
And a physical challenge.
Yeah.
So and then when we were talking, this FHWA and WashDOT environmental headquarters were also interested in looking at something. Why not use the existing interchange at Auburn Black Diamond Road? And that's this line. We wanted to be clear that there are some slope issues, but providing this connection and how it might connect to
And that's kind of what
164.
started the whole process, and they used to call that Muckleshoot Hill going up there. The hill was not stable enough for it to continue to have traffic, so that is kind of what led to this, but you'd have to beef it up.
Yeah, we know people have been looking at this, and our intent is to start to build it, start to look at it more precisely with data and analysis. So, so those are like the basket of solutions that kind of help us meet the need. If you have other ideas, we haven't closed the door on this yet. We'll be looking for public, through public involvement. We will be looking for ideas and feedback, but our first go around with the communities, like what I said, the scoping. Are we doing the right things?
Councilmember Pelosi.
Yes, are all these different options, have you put in a rough order of magnitude cost on them, estimated cost?
We will for
You haven't yet,
each,
though.
as we do the evaluation, we will have that information. As far as like trying to look in the crystal ball to make sure we can, fund this in the, in the things in the future. The state has, this Connecting Washington Partners money. It's our assumption, at least at this point, that, there would be more funding need.
Correct. Yeah, if you looked at the slides back, all in is about 95 million, and that's just kind of a thumbnail sketch.
Councilmember Wagner.
And this particular route that you show, when we studied it, you were gonna have to build a bridge practically all the way up that steep slope, and that was really expensive.
And the other thing is it's on the other side of the urban growth area, so it's cutting through farmland, and that, we have that urban growth area for a reason, and so there's, I wish there was like this easy thing, but all of these things are challenging, and we'll
That's
try
why
to.
we've hired the experts.
and working with all of you, so we find the best solution. So that's kind of where we are. And then just to kind of talk about the next steps, this continued coordination with partners, that's really important. We wanted to take a breath and make sure we, talking to all of our partners. We will get to this outreach and public stakeholders. We'll have greater detail on that as we, talk to other partners. I'd love to hear from you if summer is off the table. Alternatives, development, evaluation, public outreach, more sharpening, get our nerdy engineers in the room and put the dollars and the impacts and the environmental constraints. And then we hope to be documenting, winnowing down to a preferred solution. That's our goal. And then finalize design, permitting, public outreach, and then, and as we're doing that, pursue full funding. So that's where we're at.
Councilmember Pelosi.
I think you mentioned this before, but in your presentation, the city of Auburn is at the table on these beginning planning.
Absolutely, absolutely. They've been incredibly helpful in giving us data, and they also were very helpful in setting the stage on the methodology we'll use, what kind of modeling we would use, where, what kind of data. They were also helpful in helping us, secure a spot in the PSRC's Transportation 2040. So they've been with us, and appreciate, the commitment of staff time. They've helped us find places for groups to meet. We had a practical solutions workshop that we had actually in this room, so your staff have been really, really helpful in accommodating our data needs and what have you.
Councilmember Wagner.
The local newspaper reporter is taking notes madly over there, so I'm wondering if you have a handout for him that gives some idea of what he might want to publish in his story.
We will get you something, definitely.
Any other questions? Any other questions for our panel? Thank you very much, all three of you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And I think it was very helpful for you to share your methodology. We support being inclusive in developing ideas, and we like that you're doing economic development, which is important to us in addition to the environment, or the other way around. They're equally important. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we will move on to an update on the day-night shelter operation. This is a 15-minute presentation. Dana.
Good evening, City Council, Mayor, esteemed guests. Dana Hinman, Director of Administration, and about a month ago, you'll remember that I provided an update on the status and progress of the day and night shelter that will be hosted at Valley Cities and partnered by several nonprofits to address the homelessness need in our city. So that was more of a construction and logistics update. So I have the experts here with me to kind of give you an update on how the operational model is starting to flesh out and what things will look like on a day-to-day basis as we move forward. So I will turn it over to Ken and Debbie and Commander Herman.
Thank you. Good to see you all. Thank you for having us here this evening. So just a bit of background for you, and then once Debbie and I are done, we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. We're kind of assuming there may be a few. A reminder that the City of Auburn convened a homeless task force in 2016. And the number one priority from that task force was to increase shelter options for people here in Auburn beyond what my friend Debbie has been doing at Les Grove Park for the last 5 years. Is that right? We believe that about 90% of the people who are homeless are in fact Auburn residents. We also suspect that at least 200 children here in Auburn are homeless on any given night. We have proposed creating a day shelter that would be open basically business hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, with the hope that at some point in the not too distant future, there would be sufficient funds to make that a 7-day operation. As you probably know, Valley City sees thousands of homeless people on an annual basis. And in fact, last year, we at Valley City saw over 12,000 people, and at least 2,000 of those people were homeless. At our existing location here in Auburn, we have now 49 residential units, 25 at Valley City's Landing, which is divided between people who are either mentally ill or veterans, all of whom were homeless before they came to live there on a permanent basis. Earlier this year, we opened 24 more units of homeless housing for youth and young adults. In addition, we see in our outpatient clinic on I Street at least several hundred people who are homeless from the City of Auburn every single month. We thought and think that this is a great location because of the number of social service agencies that are nearby, DSHS, WorkSource, etc. It's also convenient to the main transportation system up and down Auburn Way. We have a personal passion for trying to find a way to address this ever-growing problem. And fundamentally, Debbie and I are here tonight because we think we have an obligation as a compassionate community to do something for these folks. That something really is about helping people with a hand up, helping them get the skills they need to move on with, quotes, a normal life, right? We're not in the business to perpetuate either behavioral health services or food bank services or homeless services. Ultimately, the goal is for us to go out of business. Most of the people who are homeless here in our city have lost a job, have some expensive medical condition which has caused them financial hardship, or are like so many people in our country now who are simply one paycheck away from being homeless. The thing I find most disheartening of all is the number of older people who are literally being evicted from housing and put out on the street. And I don't know about you, but I know I was raised to believe that was just fundamentally wrong. Nobody puts grandma in a wheelchair out on the street. And yet that's happening right here. And there are plenty of documented instances now. Unfortunately, many of those grandmas are our clients, Valley City's clients. And a lot of those folks, as they age, have dementia and Alzheimer's and related diseases, and they start doing weird stuff like hoarding. And that becomes a health issue for the tenants living near them. So ultimately, the property managers have no recourse but to literally put grandma out on the street. So, we have worked with the police department in establishing the permits for the shelter. We have worked recently with the school district and have agreed to create a safety plan for the students and the staff at Cascade. We've invited the staff from Cascade to Valley Cities in August for an open house to try to dispel some of the misinformation and misconceptions about the people that we propose to see there. We know, and I suspect you know, that there are homeless kids today attending Cascade Middle School. There are homeless kids literally living on the river in our city, walking to Cascade and to other schools. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to my friend Debbie. You can talk more specifically if you would.
Hi, thanks for having us. One of the best things I've always loved about Auburn is the fact that when there was a need, the neighborhood and friends got together and talked about it, and they came up with a plan. Chuck Booth tells the story about having dinner at his home, and mental illness came up as a conversation, and as they got through the end of the night, they had a plan to bring a site up that was called Valley Cities. And Valley Cities is here today because people sat around a table and decided there was a problem and they wanted to fix it. I know the food bank is here because of that. I know AYR is here because of that. So here's a problem we have in town today, and we want to step up and fix it. This place is a place for connections. It's a place to try to help people get out of their current situation and find a place that would be safe for them, that would give them some chances. They're coming in and out of the weather for the most part. A lot of times, there will be services all around that neighborhood. All of those agencies across the street have already been over and said, here's what we can do, here's how so we can help even better. We want to be able to connect to jobs and assisting with jobs and job training. The first day this all came out in the newspaper, I went down to dinner and made the announcement that if they hadn't read the paper, here was what it said about a possibility for a homeless shelter and a night or a day shelter. Got practically a standing ovation, and I told them, please don't thank me, I didn't do this. This was somebody else, you in fact, who came up with the task force and lined up the list of ideas to make solutions. But one of the men said to me, and he's probably about 45 years old, he said, I cannot wait for this to happen. He said, my first day there, I'm going to wash my clothes and take a shower, and I'm going to get a lot of rest. And on my second day there, I'm going to get up and take a shower, and I'm going to walk across the street to WorkSource and get a job. So he's awfully excited about this. We're trying to, make it as low barrier as possible, and give things to do for people during the day that they can't maybe get out if they're not getting out. So yes, there will be board games there, there'll be books to read, there'll be puzzles to put together, all the kinds of things that will also help them in the long run, just to keep their mind engaged. Lunch can happen there or across the street at Phoenix Cafe. Hygiene and laundry resources are available, and anytime you talk to any one of them, if they could have their highest choice to fill a need, and that would be a shower and a place to clean their clothes. We want to be able to return their self-respect, giving them a chance at a better life. Most only have their will left, their will to live left. They lost their self-esteem a long time ago. They haven't had hope or a chance for a very long time. Returning that self-esteem to them and giving them a chance will let all of us watch them rise again above their situation. Currently, they're being treated as throwaway people. They're not lepers. They're not less just because they're not like you and me. So I appreciate all the help.
The only thing I really have to say is that, we are working with Valley Cities to assist in putting this plan together, and certainly any involvement the police department will have will be in assisting in putting a code of conduct plan together. And we, other than being a presence during these events, we will have our only input will be when there is criminal activity that's being reported, and so we will certainly deal with that when people make those sorts of bad decisions. So.
Be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Councilmember Wagner.
Are there any plans for security staff on your staff as opposed to the police?
Valley Cities, when we opened Phoenix Rising, we've learned a lot of lessons since we opened. And we now have professional security there 16 hours a day. And we're prepared to expand that if that is appropriate. We'll do whatever is necessary to keep both the children in the neighborhood as well as our clients safe.
Councilmember Pelosi.
Dana, has the city already budgeted for our participation?
We did budget in the last biennial budget. We put a line item in for the homeless task force and addressing some of the programs that would come out of the homeless task force. And currently, right now, we are looking at existing budgets to augment that funding if needed, and also working specifically with Valley City staff. They have some fantastic grant writers, and we will also be looking for private funding as well as we move forward to try to mitigate and offset any actual cost to the city beyond what we've already budgeted.
And what was the budget?
We are working on that right now. We are waiting.
Apparently, we've already approved something, the council.
Yes, and I do believe it was $25,000 each year, which was put in the homeless task force line item, and then we'll look at some other things going forward.
One of the things that we asked a number of times is that we get a copy of the task force report, again, that had great ideas, and that you give an estimate of how much those ideas would cost, so that when we come across additional funding, we can see which one kind of piques our interest. And so I'm asking again for that information.
Okay, we can provide that again. Sure.
Okay, great. Councilmember DeCoursey.
Who are the other partners, Ken, that you got involved in this on the social service aspect?
Specifically, if we were to extend the sheltering to a nighttime shelter, and part of our permit that was granted allows us to do that, we would strongly recommend Catholic Community Services. Valley Cities got into this project really because we had a vacant piece of land, and I never even contemplated doing this without partners like the food bank and like Catholic Community Services. These aren't the kinds of services that we typically provide, and so right at the very outset, it's like, let's find people who know how to do this and have already done it. And so that would be my hope, would be that ultimately the city would contract with all three agencies, Catholic Community Services, the food bank, and Valley Cities.
Well, I've been meeting with some of the churches Grace Community and Holy Family. I didn't know that you were on this quest, but they're ready to step up to the plate and do something, and so maybe this network.
We actually expect to have the involvement of many churches and many civic organizations that our staff have gone out and spoken to, and really introduced the idea of what Valley Cities does and what we're doing at Phoenix Rising, and that this would be something that we could offer. And I think it's important that everyone recognize that this was a temporary solution. This was not designed ever to be a permanent solution. This is a 18 to 24 months at maximum. Valley Cities has had this land for a long time, and we intended then and intend now ultimately to build more permanent housing on that spot.
Councilmember Wagner.
And how many staff do you have, and how many are professional counselors?
At Valley Cities or in Auburn? Or
Cities.
Valley Cities, we have about 375 staff currently. That's going to grow really rapidly over the next year. We expect by this time next year to have about 600 full and part-time staff. That's because we're adding 100 beds. We are literally opening 68 detox beds in Beacon Hill and 32 psychiatric hospital beds in Kent. And our board is determined to try to make an impact in some of these areas. And so we've grown rapidly, and we expect to continue to grow very rapidly for the next year and a half.
How many psychiatric beds are you growing to in Kent?
32 beds total. 16 are for people who have been involuntarily detained as a result of their mental illness, and 16 for people who've been detained because of their substance abuse disorder.
Right.
Although oftentimes it's very difficult to tell the difference between one or the other, and there are what we would call coexisting or comorbid conditions probably 2/3 or 3/4 of the time. So I call it 32 beds. We literally, we started literally last week. We got our building permits from the city of Kent, and about 9 months from now we'll open those 32 beds. We'll open the 68 beds on Beacon Hill around October 1st of this year.
Councilmember Trout, Manuel.
Again, thank you for taking the lead on this, or
You don't know.
well, you know, stepping out and,
Thank you. You're welcome.
helping out on this, because the homeless issue has been an issue since I've been on city council. That was my first priority, and I have worked with Catholic Services in Federal Way, and I saw what they've done over there, and I came back and I mentioned it to our mayor, and I've asked why we didn't have the rest of the churches involved here. And nothing to take away from you, Debbie, you are gracious and with your time and everything you do, but we always seem to be putting a lot on you when we have so many services here that are willing to step up and help out. So I'm just, when we first heard about you doing this, was the first time we heard about it. We were not aware of any of that, and you are the one that told me about it. So it's been a hard issue to, you know, decide on which way to go when we're not at the table with you guys as well. So, but I just wanted to say thank you for doing this.
Well, you know, if there was a way to nominate someone for sainthood, my friend Debbie would be like #1 on my list. Because I would not have done this project without Debbie.
But that's what I said. You know, she does so much, and Debbie's not going to be doing this job forever.
Yes, she
So
is.
it would be
Yeah.
nice to see other people step up and, you know, learn from you. And we have a lot of resources in this city that could work with you.
Ken, I think what she's also trying to say is we'd all like to be players involved in this too.
Yes.
And it's a shame that, well, we would like to be more of a player in this, and would like to suggest some ideas such as Grace Community and Holy Family and some other agencies. But you had a comment you wanted to make, Councilmember
Just a quick
Baggett.
question I wanted to ask Ken. Where exactly are you proposing to do the night shelter?
Valley Cities forever and a day has had 3 community rooms in our office building on I Street. Those community rooms have a private entrance just on the north side of the building. They also have private restrooms, and there's a small kitchen facility there. So our proposal was, we've historically locked the rest of the building off and have loaned that space out to the Auburn City Orchestra, for example, and other organizations have met there. And it's like, well, we could turn this into a nighttime shelter lickety-split, because there's movable walls, and it would be pretty easy to open this up and turn it into one large room about the size of the council chambers. It's not, it's not going to be grand accommodations, but, with mats on the floor, we could accommodate 30 or so people there. They have access to restrooms. When daylight comes, they have to go out the door, because we're going to convert it back and use it as we normally do during the day, which is for groups. We run hundreds of groups out of there on a monthly basis.
Speaking as president of a homeowner association that has been meeting over there
Oh.
with your gracious cooperation and assistance, we're not happy to be moving out of there, but I guess our next meeting will be the last.
Yeah. Well, we have other meeting space.
But we have arranged other space down at the river, and I think that this is a good thing.
So what we would do, just very briefly, our friends from Catholic Community Services would literally show up when we close at the end of the day, open the rooms up, put mats on the floor, lock everything down. We'd welcome our guests. They'd welcome their guests at night. People would come in, have a place to stay. In the morning, we just sort of reverse the steps, and out the door they go. And is it a great solution? No, it is not. But we felt obligated to try to step up and offer something, anything.
It's an excellent use of those facilities.
That might help a little bit.
Councilmember Trout-Manuel.
We've talked about tiny houses around, and I know that there's one in Olympia that is working very well.
My former church, to be precise.
And I just happen to have a cousin who works at the factory that builds all those little tiny houses, and he told me about how they do them and stuff. And Seattle is ordering a large number from that place, but hopefully one of these days maybe we might go that route. I don't know, but I see that's a way to keep these individuals contained in their own little private, house. And so coming back to the night shelter, so will you be evaluating everyone that comes in there? Because that's what they do in Federal Way. They evaluate the person if they've been under the influence of alcohol or drugs or anything like that. If they are not accepted. Is that the way you're going to be?
What we've envisioned for the night shelter is that Catholic Community Services would be screening everyone before they're admitted on any given night. So Valley Cities, we want to keep our part of this really contained to the mental health or behavioral health services, and really rely on Debbie with regard to the day shelter and Catholic Community Services with regard to the nighttime shelter. So we're happy to lend the space or the land as for the day shelter, but we don't want to do something if there are other places that know how to do this better than us.
Councilmember Pelosi.
So Ken, the word screen, how are they screened? Obviously, you don't do a background check, do you? Or do you? Or do they?
Well, Debbie can describe her process.
So Catholic Community Services has done that when they've been in church buildings that have required that. They do something different at every site they're at, depending on what requirements are. So at this location, we were trying to make it as very low barrier as possible. That's the way the emergency shelter has been running. We've not had any issues with that. This is Auburn, and Auburn has always been kinder and a little bit more proactive in the way that we handle people. So screening them for who knows what, I don't know. You can, so when I talked to the Catholic Community Services at the time too, one of the reasons for even screening is that face-to-face, getting to know somebody. So what are their issues? You're asking them those kinds of things. You're asking them what kind of services they might need besides what we can maybe sort of obviously see. So that was one of the answers back from them. It really isn't my desire, I guess, and I'm not the one running it, to see a lot of barriers put up and only the cream of the crop of the homeless get to stay there, because they're probably the ones who already have the ability to get someplace and the ability to couch hop, which means they're knocking on friends' doors and borrowing a couch every other night. So the ones that don't have that ability need the sheltering more than the ones who can. So.
Councilmember Wagner.
Ken, when I asked you before about your staff, and you quoted several hundred people, the other part of my question was how many are professional counselors? Because I've been skeptical of volunteers handling this population at churches and so on. But I'm totally comfortable with your staff doing it, but I just want to get a feeling for how many of those human beings there are.
The people that I mentioned, 100% of those are paid professional staff. Many of them are licensed. We have the largest, I believe, psychiatric staff of any provider in the county. We have almost 30 MD psychiatrists and psychiatric nurse practitioners now. And we have, literally dozens and dozens of mental health professionals and chemical dependency professionals. While we use volunteers in ways like we have community resource rooms, for example, where anyone can walk in off the street and sit down at one of our computers. And so we'll have a volunteer who will sit there with someone and help them find and navigate community resources and things like that. We're talking about paid professional staff.
One of the concerns I have is been shared with me from the neighbors up on the West Hill, and it was brought to my attention because I read in the paper that we were going to do this. I didn't know the exact location. I since went down and took a picture of it, but it was brought to my attention by parents as I knocked on their doors, and they've got it through the rumor mill. And because the school district tries to socioeconomically, kind of gerrymander things so that we have a wide range of kids at each school, the West Hill kids go to Cascade.
Mm-hmm.
And I think waiting until August to share and open the place up to share with those families might be a little late because they're already requesting transfers to different middle schools. And when I talked to some of the staff this week at Cascade, I think the sooner you could do the open houses, the better would, relieve some of their fears and unknown. They have not been communicated with, the ones that I've talked to, but I'm talking to parents and people that answer the phones at the school, not to the, the real opinion makers and the power brokers.
Right. No, we would be happy to do this sooner. We're actually hung up a little bit waiting for our friends at PSE to drop a power pole into the location and then to connect the power from the pole to the unit. And as soon as that happens...
Well, that permitting kind of takes a while, too.
Well, the city of Auburn...
expedited it.
The city of Auburn has been remarkable. I mean, I have been doing this for a very, very long time, and you all are to be praised because no other jurisdiction has done something like this. This is really a big deal. And, you know, one of the points that we haven't made is that from the outset, we've been talking about this being what I call an Auburn-centric project, and that we really didn't want county money or other dollars that would open this up to non-Auburn residents if we could possibly avoid that. That'll be a challenge, of course, to be able to fund this, but fundamentally really trying to create something for people in Auburn and to keep it that way to the extent we can.
I think that that is an important point, that as I talk to people, they don't want to become the center for it. They really want to just, with their big hearts, help those that reside here.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the other significant problems that we have is that we have a number of service locations for the homeless. And it's the collateral damage that they do while they're waiting for the service or they're done with the service that they do in the neighborhoods that really has a number of people upset. And collateral damage is they may come back at a different time and do something, or they sleep out in the bushes. Now you are going to have a day shelter and a night shelter, but there, you won't, it'll become a collection point. And so anything that you can do to address some of that collateral damage.
Well, you know, honestly, we want to become a collection point because we want to get people engaged in services, and we want to get people out of downtown, out of the library, out of those places that really were never intended to be used the way they're being used. And, you know, with your support, if we can provide a place for people to go, I mean, as simple as that, a place with a roof over somebody's head to come out of the rain, then maybe they're not hanging out behind the Safeway, you know, down the street here. So that's our hope. I mean, we're trying to keep this as simple as we possibly can because most of the people we're going to meet are, they're kind of without hope at this point in their lives.
And I think you picked up the two hot spots with the library and Safeway. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Councilmember Trout-Manuel.
Ken, how are you going to guarantee that these people are not going to roam into, there's a lot of apartments around that area, lots of kids around that area, and them going into the school. I know I talked to the principal because he's on one of the committees that I'm on, and his biggest concern is them wandering through the schools. They've even asked, and we have grant money to give them money to put cameras around the schools, because their biggest concern when they heard about this coming into their backyard, how do you guarantee those people are not going to be roaming around and sleeping at the school and all this and that?
Oh, I would never, ever guarantee those things to you.
Well, you said you would, you're hoping that you
Well,
would.
we will, and we are going to work with the district to improve fencing and signage and security and all of those kinds of things. But you probably don't know that every night when Valley Cities closes, there are people who come and literally sleep under the eaves of our building on I Street. And that, honestly, is what got me started on this personal crusade. It's like, well, this is just wrong. You know, for us to find people when we come to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, we're sleeping upside our building or by our dumpsters or all of those things. So it's already there. And part of this is really acknowledging, while hopefully none of us are comfortable with this reality, it's the reality, right? And we'll do everything we can to work with our friends in law enforcement to make sure that there's clear lines of sight. And so it doesn't hurt that my friend Debbie's son works for the Auburn Police Department, who will probably, you know, keep a close eye on how things are going. So
That used to be his area up there. Is it still his area up there? No, they moved it. Okay. Well, Councilmember Pelosi.
Just a quick, Dana, so what are your plans to get some grant money to assist in the program? And second question, when will you approach the city council for more funds? Two questions.
Two questions. First of all, the private funding, like I said before, we've worked already with Valley City's grant writers and fundraising team. The one thing we really want to be careful about is that we don't have a negative effect on the current funding of nonprofits by approaching, let's say we approach Gates or Rakes or some of those other large funders now. In fact, one that we did apply for, they said, you know what, this looks good, we love the partnership, we love how it looks, but we're already funding this other Valley Cities project, so should we fund this one or that one? Well, the answer to that is that one. We don't want to, so we're gonna have to nuance the private asks right now. As far as when we will come forward to City Council, probably in this next budget amendment we're working on right now. We are, as we kind of go through and look at what existing funding sources are out there right now. Shelley, I don't know if Shelley's still here.
Oh, there she is.
She hiding? Hi, Shelley.
But, I guess where I'm coming from is, this is a serious matter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the whole council feels this is a serious matter.
Right.
And I just know we could get emergency funds.
Well, and that's part of, one thing that we're really looking at is seeing what our legislature does. Because there are a lot of funding recommendations coming forward for homeless services, mental health services, all sorts of things. As you know, they're still in special session, so we haven't seen exactly what is going to come out of the current budget, as well as even at the federal level if it reaches that point. But to Ken and Debbie's point, we want to be careful about the money that we accept because most grant funds have strings attached. For example, if we accept King County money, then that is going to kind of take away from that Auburn-centric philosophy that we all have to address homelessness here in our city, and so we have to be very careful with what we ask for.
We have to absolutely do that. I think that the selling point of the food bank is that we give it to Auburn people. And, yes, go ahead.
Well, the thing is, what's the date of the opening of this event?
Oh.
We actually don't have a hard date to open it because we're still hung up on the PSE question, so.
You probably hear about it in the
electricity.
paper.
Yeah, so we've envisioned a soft opening maybe in the next month, perhaps even sooner if we get the poll and get everything connected and L&I signs off on it and all of those kinds of things. I mean, the unit is there. We're ready to furnish it with the generosity of people and places here in Auburn. So we could go pretty darn quickly. But things work in mysterious ways sometimes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And
Just
could
one
you?
last update. Debbie was mentioning also that the food bank has a line item for the current overnight shelter, and they've $13,000. There's been $13,000 in donations to the food bank for overnight sheltering operations, and there is a large belief that I think that benevolent giving of our community likely will continue as well.
Well, the city should be able to match that.
All right, there we go. On record, people.
I was looking
Shelley, write
to
that
you,
down.
Bill.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you pull your checkbook out every once in a
Yes.
while, and
Every
I don't
once in a
mind
while, the
helping you
moths
fill
come
that
out
out.
of it.
I'll bring down pears.
Oh, you do that.
We'll take pairs.
Dana, will you get me a list of the other task force ideas and just a ballpark idea of their cost for maybe our meeting on Thursday that Yolanda and I are having with your department?
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Good job.
Thanks, Debbie.
Okay, now we'll move
Thanks,
on
Dana.
to, it's 12
Thanks,
minutes
Chief.
before our 7 o'clock break. Do you want us to take a break now or wait until just before your presentation?
Doesn't matter, it's up to you.
Why don't we do this first? I don't think this is gonna take
Okay,
that long.
we're gonna do this first and then we'll take a break.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not for a while.
Okay.
There's several.
Let's move on to item B, Deputy Mayor Selection Ad Hoc Committee Report. And we will, who's the chair?
I am.
Okay, go for it.
Pass around.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's me, hogging them all.
Uh-oh.
So what is being passed around now is the modification as we had the discussion at our last study session related to the proposal to do a modification of section 12 of the City Council Rules of Procedure.
Do you want Jessica to sit up there so she'll be ready to answer any questions?
I'm good.
Okay, great.
And the proposed modifications. Now, at the last meeting, I did ask for input from council members of any other suggestions or any other comments they wanted to make, and we didn't receive any. So we proceeded with the process of taking what we had at that study session and making modifications to this document based upon that. And a couple of the things that were asked on the session was related to timelines in some of these sections we had here for absences and other things related to Mayor Pro Tem duties. And then also in relation to the rotation process and how that takes place. So what you'll see here on page one is just a scrivener's error, just a typo on section E. On page 2, added J to the 12.1 section regarding the selection process. And I'll read it, you have it there, but in the event the council president rotation and selection results in the assigned council president's failure to perform duties of the position or a failure to act in accordance with the city council rules of procedure, the city council shall take the necessary action to remove council president and assign the next senior council member in rotation as council president. Further down on the mayor pro tem, we looked at the terms of absence and incapacitation and felt we should provide at least a brief description of what incapacitation would mean. And that in this process is a state of disability that prohibits a function of duties. The next is related to the time frame that we discussed at the last study session where we had no specific time frame in here. So this now clarifies that in both looking at short-term absences of the mayor, which would include items such as out-of-state travel, out-of-country travel, and then the mayor pro tem would be taking over the duties of the mayor in that situation. And also, there's a little bit of a script error here. There's no closed parens to the word pro tem, so we're going to correct that. A1B, other short-term absences by the mayor, which includes leave of absences or annual leave for short-term periods, in this case, longer than 1 week, or in-state, out-of-city travel, for illnesses that require an absence from the office of less than a week. There's no assumption of duties by the mayor pro tem in that situation. And then lastly on this is a C for the longer-term absences, both due to illness or other types of absences or incapacitation, then the mayor pro tem shall perform the duties of the mayor. And as we noted that, added one statement to, which is now item 2, that says, in the performance of the duties of the mayor pro tem shall not have authority to appoint, remove, replace, or take other similar action of any director and or any city employee of the city. So those are basically the modifications that we wanted to present, and we just want to open up for further discussion.
Mayor Backus, please.
Thank you. So, under Mayor Pro Tem, item 1A, the periods of time related to short-term absences of the mayor, such as out-of-state travel or out-of-country travel, duties of the mayor shall be delegated to the Mayor Pro Tem. The only item that I can recall that I have not been able to do during times on travel is to sign off on any funding or any contracts, and that goes to the finance director. Everything else is still, because I am still on duty, everything else I am still able to accomplish other than perhaps a meeting face-to-face. So this doesn't seem quite right, because there is this great thing called technology that allows us to be connected 24/7. So it seems a little odd that because of out-of-state travel, there would be that.
Well, there's situations, I would think, like when it comes to swearing in police officers and some of those type things that would be hard to do electronically, but they could possibly be rescheduled, worked around planned travel.
And I think our intent here, Mayor, was to look at, we talk about a delegation of duties. So if there are things that do come up that require kind of an in-person process, then those would be delegated to the mayor pro tem at that point. I don't think it's the intent here that we abscond any of the duties of the mayor in this process. It's just, in some respects, just kind of filling in when those absences occur, if we need to do that. Currently, the council rules of procedure only say that the deputy mayor shall fill in basically when requested. So we wanted to clarify that, put a little more context to it.
Deputy Mayor Wales and Councilmember, might I ask a clarifying question?
Turn your mic on.
There we go.
Yes, please.
Excuse me. So as I read it, we have section 12.1A that begins on the first page, and a subsection A that begins on the second page, identifying Mayor Pro Tem. Could you just tell me how it is that you intend these to read together in the rules and procedure? Are you suggesting that this language regarding Mayor Pro Tem be adopted as part of the council's rules and procedure?
What we are proposing, Jessica, is that this becomes the new section 12 of the council rules of procedure in its entirety.
So including, in that case, I would recommend looking at the language that you've proposed, starting on page 2 for subsection A regarding Mayor Pro Tem. The complication there is that by statute, the Mayor Pro Tem is a different function than the council president or the deputy mayor. And Mayor Pro Tem by statute does in fact have to be voted on by a majority of the council. And so in our current situation, that works because if you just say the deputy mayor serves as Mayor Pro Tem in the absence of the mayor, you have all voted on that person each year. In this scenario, it would be entirely feasible that a sitting council member never had an opportunity to vote on the Mayor Pro Tem if something came up in the future. And so this would not audit. So if you want to use the provisions that are provided for on page 1 in 12.1, what you would need to do is remove the provisions regarding the Mayor Pro Tem and instead move to a process whereby you always have a council president, but anytime a Mayor Pro Tem is needed, the council would meet and vote on the appointment of a Pro Tem mayor for that specific event.
Was your intent to have Mayor Pro Tem, President Council, or Deputy Mayor, one person to perform all those functions and to rename it Deputy or Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, well, basically rename the Deputy Mayor role to Council President.
Oh, okay.
And in accordance with RCW 35A.12.065, which we put in here for reference only, is to identify the Council President as the Mayor Pro Tem in the absence of the Mayor. So it sounds like that may be incorrect on how that's being assumed of how we transition into the Mayor Pro Tem as Council President?
In combination with a proposed seniority system, yes. If you do not make a change to the current scenario, which is just appointment by majority vote every year, then you could combine the two functions. It's simply the combination of seniority and pro tem that creates a statutory conflict, or at least the potential for one.
So in that context, we would strike Mayor Pro Tem and maintain what we're proposing here as the term Council President.
That is one option, yes.
Okay. Which has a question?
Councilmember Wagner.
I kind of like the things Jessica's saying, giving the council a chance to vote if, in fact, the deputy mayor, president, whatever they're called, it has to take over for the mayor for a period of time. That removes my objection to the seniority system, as long as we have that protection against an incompetent person taking over the day-to-day management of the city.
Okay. Can I ask a clarifying question, please?
Yes.
Go
ahead.
So in the current statute, it says biennially at the first meeting of a new council or periodically the members thereof by majority vote may designate one of their members as mayor pro tem or deputy mayor. So, and I guess it was Councilman Wagner saying that if we maintain the term mayor pro tem, but then strike the council president designation, we'd have two processes that would occur in this new section. One would be the appointment of a council president on a rotating basis. Yes. The other would be the selection of a mayor pro tem in the absence of the mayor on a voting basis. Is that correct?
Yes.
Councilmember Holman.
First, I'd like to recognize the amount of work that's gone into this and thank my colleagues for the effort they put in. And what I'm going to say probably will sound like I'm not appreciating the work that you put in on it. I really do, because I know this takes a lot of time to develop these. But of the survey you took of the 10 cities, only one had a seniority-based system, I believe, was the tally, and that was a city a quarter the size of Auburn. And two, I'm from the school of that used the KISS system. Keep it simple, Sergeant.
You cleaned that up a lot.
No, and I'm trying to figure out, since we all choose once a year who's going to be deputy mayor, what's the purpose of a seniority system? Why go to all this complexity when what we have seems to work pretty good? I haven't seen, I don't think it's broken. It works.
Councilmember Trout-Manuel.
I have to disagree. From what I've been seeing, our deputy mayor has not been being used as deputy mayor. Her position has been filled by either yourself, by Rich, by one of us city council members to go to ribbon cuttings when the mayor can't make it, to school events when the mayor can't make it, to swearing in some officers when the mayor can't make it. And you would think that that would be the deputy mayor's position to go to. And and then again, I just heard it again from Rich, somebody that's not competent. That statement right there is kind of contradicting what the voters have done by voting us into city council. So that makes us all competent to be able to fill in a position wherever we are voted in, or say seniority. And it just makes me feel like, because some of us don't have the college degree that some of you guys have, that's the only way that you can be competent, or hold an engineering degree, you're competent, or holding a doctorate's degree. And I feel like we're leaving out a step where the voters voted us in, so we should be all competent enough to fill the position as deputy mayor.
Councilmember Holman.
I just attended a ribbon cutting late last week at a new restaurant, Vinifera, where Deputy Mayor Wales was intended.
But that was a notice that they let us know the same day.
You need to know that I was not contacted by the city. I was contacted by other people.
Well,
You also need to know that...
Well, let me finish, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, excuse
Please,
me. Yeah, I will.
And then as far as competency in college education, I don't think any of us that have run for deputy mayor have touted our education. It just requires the vote of our colleagues. So you want to take away the decision of our colleagues on who they wish to chair meetings. And put it into a seniority system. I don't see a need for that. If I choose to vote for Yolanda Trout next year for deputy mayor, I'll nominate and I'll vote for Yolanda Trout.
But John, you said at last meeting that we had, that several of you and Mr. Baggett and Rich Wagner suggested that we put into our, into this qualifications. And we all started looking at what qualifications do we need to be able to be a deputy mayor?
I don't
because we were
recall
on-
ever asking for
Yes.
qualifications.
There
I
was,
did.
there was
Okay.
in there that you
Yes.
wanted us to bring it back, a qualification, because you don't want somebody that, like Rich said, that is incompetent to be able to run a meeting.
Self-serving, yeah.
So anyways, that's where I'm coming from. You guys are taking it away from us council members that we've been elected by the city to serve.
Councilmember DeCoursey.
Maybe kind of bring this down a tone or two.
Thank you.
But this was looking at was, now use the term loosely, was looking at eliminating a popularity contest in the selection of a
Yes.
deputy mayor. Where 7 of us on the council, we approach 1 or 2 council members, do you want to be deputy mayor this year? Would you like to be deputy mayor? Or a council member saying, I'd like to be deputy mayor. And then almost inadvertently, we have a contest between the 7 of us who gets voted in. If there's only 1 person who's selected, maybe somebody else gets nominated. What this does, it just eliminates that. It provides a sense of, I'll use the term stability, where we have a situation where, although maybe it's not the most popular way to do it, the most senior member of the council member at the next selection process becomes the deputy mayor, council president, whatever term we want to call this again. And then as that time goes on, it passes through the process. Now, the downside of it is that if we have situations where council members are on for 4 years, they may never get a chance to serve as the council president / deputy mayor or whatever. But in our opinion, what it does, it eliminates the contest and provides a little bit more stability into the process. So,
Okay, Councilmember Pelosi.
I'm going to address the attorney. Jessica?
Yes, sir.
If we were to delete the word deputy mayor out of this whole 12.1 section and stayed with just council president, wouldn't that eliminate your concern that you spoke first?
Ultimately, no, because you have language in here beginning on page 2 that would require a sort of, irrespective of the title, the function of what the statute is identifying as sort of, I'll call them pro tem functions, as being automatically vested in the person that's selected based on seniority.
Well, what if we took out the word mayor pro tem out of the whole section?
So unfortunately, it's not the words, it's not the title that matters, it's the duties in question. And what I'm saying is the combination of selection based on priority, on seniority, together with the duties, is something that I would advise you not to do, because it's not a selection based on majority vote. And that's, for the duties, that's required by statute.
So what would be a possibility and a best of both worlds would be to have a council president, and then at the time that there's going to be a possible prolonged absence, the council at that time would elect a mayor pro tem to fill that position until such time as the mayor came back. Would that work?
And I think
Then you'd have your double check. You'd have your December election for the year of council president. The mayor gets sick in March. You would have an election on the council of a mayor pro tem to fill in for that week or whatever until the mayor comes back. Would that work? Councilmember Wagner.
I was going to suggest the same thing, that we have some kind of timing issue or the mayor pro tem or whatever they're called is going to have to take over day-to-day operations. And that during that week that it would take to get us all together to vote, maybe the president, or council president is that person, but we would have that double check of us voting on who is competent. And I probably shouldn't use the word competent as much as I do, but think about human resources management. How many of us were elected on that qualification? And yet, when you vote for mayor, that's what, at least for me, that's one of the first things I think about is she's got 400 people that manage. And so, Linda, I disagree with you that people elect us thinking we could be the day-to-day manager of the city.
I'm just saying that there's no qualifications to even run as a city council. There's none. And for this legislative body wanting us to put a qualification to be that, you know, is just, to me, I just found it to be so small.
Councilmember
So let
DeCoursey.
me make a suggestion with this. I would suggest that the committee, Councilmember Pelosi, Trumani, and myself, get back together again to do a redraft of what we heard tonight. One thing that was just mentioned that you mentioned, Deputy Mayor, that I like in this process is you use the term prolonged absence. Yeah. And I think what we should do is take out the short-term relationship and use the mayor pro tem as a context of prolonged absence and define the term of what that is. And that also should clarify the issues on the statute, where again, the mayor pro tem is selected either annually or periodically. And we have the division between mayor pro tem and council president. And we can pass it over as a committee, bring it back once again to the next study session, followed by, after that, bring it to council for a vote.
Councilmember Holman.
Going back to my point of keeping it simple. Right now, if we have a prolonged absence, you serve as the functionary of the mayor. We have no problem with the revised Code of Washington in that you were elected. It works, it's simple, it doesn't require 3 pages of rules and procedures with separate elections, if in fact that occurs. We could have a tragedy occur where we would need a mayor the next day. So now we're going to have argument and debate for a week as to who among us is elected. No, it should be the deputy mayor that we elected. We're making something terribly complex that should only have to be done once a year.
I've been deputy mayor for a year and a half now, and it doesn't work. I'm not notified or included in the things that I should be included. The schedule is gerrymandered so I can't be included. Some of my functions are removed and then given to you, and I call up to find out somebody was absent and I'm supposed to fill in, but then the person's coming back and I've been removed. The system we have now does not work. In October of each year, when it's time for us to do our elections, we spend October, November, and December wasting taxpayers' time as we try to gerrymander who's going to be the next leader based on popularity or who always votes the way you are or this, that, and the other. And believe it or not, we have been tackling this topic since February, and we've spent February, March, April, May, and now June also wasting time. I think that it's nice if we just have it automatic. There's still an opportunity if it's, you know, Yolanda's turn and she doesn't feel like she wants to do it, to say, I want to pass, realizing I may never get the opportunity. That is respected. If there's a situation where there is a mayor that's going to be gone for a prolonged way, will have the safety net of the additional vote. I like to see where things are spelled out because I am not being used properly at this time. And I'm willing to concede that if we can go to seniority and then with the double check vote. Councilmember Holman.
Tell me, let's say you were selected by seniority.
Mhm.
Could you have still been bypassed? Could the same thing that you just described happen to someone that was selected by? So how does the selection solve the problems that you just alleged have occurred?
Okay, so let's say it's November. And so they're going to say, who has the most seniority? Rich, but Rich has done it. So then we will go to Bill. Bill decides he's going to have open heart surgery, so he's going to pass. Who's the next senior person? I've already done it. You've already done it. So it leaves it to the three of you. Which one of you got the most votes in the last election? Okay, Claude is now our by 18, he's our deputy mayor. Moving along, he's our deputy mayor. Nancy decides to go on vacation for her 25th wedding anniversary, and she's going to do it for 2 weeks. That's prolonged. So we're going to vote. Okay. Well, it turns out that our deputy mayor is going to have a baby. A grandchild, and he's going to be gone, so the rest of us will vote on who's the mayor pro tem. It'll work. And it'll work instead of us fretting over it for 3 or 4 months in a row and posturing. We'll be voting our conscience through that entire, until there's an emergency, and then we'll step up to the plate and do it. So, Councilmember Holman.
Over-dramatized.
Okay, can I
Yes.
What's
Out of order.
What's over-dramatized?
Out of order.
What the heck?
That was a lot of posturing.
John, I have
Jeez.
stared at your beautiful blue eyes
Green.
10 feet away, and you don't do that? Come on, man. Come on.
I
Give
thought
me a
it was an
break.
invitation to give an example. I'm sorry if I took too much time. Councilmember DeCoursey.
I want everybody to keep in mind that what we're drafting here, although it affects the current city council, is not just for this current city council, okay?
Exactly.
This is a policy change that affects councils in the future until they, at some point in time, if and when, decide to change this policy and procedure. One of the things we defined in here was the council president, deputy mayor, again, whatever term you want to put on it, duties that are very loosely described in the current council procedures now. This provides more context to that. So in any case, whatever way this council decides to go when this comes before the council as a vote, I would definitely recommend that we look at page 3 and item B, that we absolutely have defined and well-defined duties of that position to make sure that that role is specifically in tune with what the council needs to perform its duties. The first one on here is that the council president shall serve as the head of the legislative branch of city government. We are the legislative body, we need a legislative head. That helps us, whatever type of legislation process we go through or need to have. It focuses in on the individual who's responsible for helping us carry that forward. It also becomes the individual that we have a go-to person to go to for any of those issues or concerns we need to have for legislation as it comes forward in the future. So again, my final statement will be is that we will go ahead and make some changes to this as a committee, bring it back to the council study session one last time, and then we would recommend that we bring it forward to council for a full vote, whatever that vote may be in that process.
Possibly July, we want to make sure that we're all here.
This will have to come in the July session.
Okay, great.
At the Yeah, at one of the July study session and July city council meeting.
We're going to move on, we're going to take a break. Okay? We'll take a break for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and rapidly move through the rest of the agenda.